She didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't make a scene, just walked out of the conference room with an old canvas bag, carrying a $108 million collapse inside it. They thought firing her would save money. They forgot she was the only one keeping the entire empire from federal sanctions. The clearance holder, the compliance architect, the woman they'd just made invisible. And in 72 hours, they'd learn exactly what that meant. My name is Alex Morgan, and for 11 years, I was the invisible foundation holding Savanta Systems together. 42 years old, no corner office, no executive parking spot, just a modest desk on the 7th floor where I built an empire of compliance that nobody understood until it was gone. That Wednesday started like any other. Coffee at 7:30 a.m., first audit review by 8, 3 calls with DCMA before 9. Then came the email from Isla Redford, our new vice president of operations, 29 years old, fresh from some accelerated leadership program at Wharton, and coincidentally the CEO's niece. The subject line was brief. Mandatory meeting, 2 p.m. I knew what was coming. For 6 months, I'd watched Isla systematically dismantle everything she deemed redundant. First, she merged procurement with finance. Then she outsourced half of quality assurance to a firm in Delaware. Last month, she'd renamed my department from Federal Compliance and Risk Management to simply Admin Support, tucking it under her direct supervision like an afterthought. The conference room smelled like leather and ambition. Isla sat at the head of the table, her MBA displayed prominently on the credenza behind her, next to a photo of her shaking hands with her uncle at her hiring ceremony. She didn't look up when I entered. "Alex, please sit." Her voice had that practice neutrality they teach in management seminars. "I'll keep this brief. As part of our ongoing efficiency initiatives, we're restructuring several departments. Your position has been identified as surplus to requirements." Surplus. 11 years of building every firewall between Savanta and federal prosecution, reduced to a line item on a spreadsheet. "I see," I said, folding my hands on the table. "When would you like me to transition my responsibilities?" She blinked, clearly expecting tears or protests. "That won't be necessary. We've already contracted with Compliance Corps to handle the basic filing requirements. They've assured us they can maintain all necessary certifications at 40% less cost." Compliance Corps, a template factory that downloaded forms from government websites and called it expertise. I almost smiled. "Of course," I said. "Just one question. Isla, who's listed as the authorized compliance officer on our current cage file?" Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together. "The what?" "The cage file. Commercial and Government Entity Code. It's how the Department of Defense identifies us as a cleared contractor." I kept my voice conversational, helpful even. "Someone needs to be designated as the facility security officer with active clearance. It's not just paperwork, it's a federal requirement for our contracts." "I'm sure that's all handled," she said, waving a manicured hand. "HR will process your exit paperwork. You have until 5 p.m. to clear your desk. Security will escort you out." I stood, smoothing my skirt. "Understood. I'll make sure to properly close out my access to the federal systems." Yes, please do that," she said, already turning to her phone. I paused at the door. "Isla, you might want to check who's listed on Contract 918BX17, the $100 million one, just so you know who to contact if DCMA calls." She didn't look up. "Thank you for your service, Alex. HR will mail your final check." I walked back to my desk, passing the cubicles of people I'd trained, systems I'd built, processes I'd refined until they ran like clockwork. They all thought compliance was just filing papers and checking boxes. They had no idea it was a living organism, fed by relationships, trust, and above all, irreplaceable institutional knowledge. My desk was already boxed up. They'd done it while I was in the meeting. How efficient. I picked up my old canvas bag, the one I'd carried since my first day, and added just 3 things: my personal backup drive, my coffee mug with the faded DCMA logo, and a single manila folder marked Personal Copy, Contract 918BX17. The security guard, Marcus, looked embarrassed as he escorted me to the elevator. "I'm sorry about this, Ms. Morgan. You trained me on the visitor clearance protocols my first week." "It's just business, Marcus," I said. "Make sure they update the entry logs. You'll need a new authorizing signature by close of business Friday. He frowned. For what? For the Class 6 visitors, the federal inspectors, the ones who come every month to verify our clearance status. I stepped into the elevator. I'm sure Isla has it covered. As the doors closed, I saw his face go pale. He was smart enough to know what I hadn't said without an authorized signature. Those inspectors couldn't enter. And if they couldn't enter, they couldn't verify. And if they couldn't verify, well, Isla was about to learn that some corners, when cut, make the whole structure collapse. The parking garage echoed with my footsteps as I walked to my 12-year-old Honda Civic. No one knew the real story of how I'd built Savanta's compliance infrastructure from nothing, turning a company that couldn't get basic vendor certifications into a trusted defense contractor handling classified projects. I'd started as a junior analyst in 2013, when Savanta was just 40 employees crammed into a warehouse outside Baltimore. Douglas Redford had big dreams, but no idea how to navigate federal contracting. I was the one who spent nights studying the federal acquisition regulations, weekends at DCMA workshops, building relationships with contracting officers who'd seen 100 startups fail for lack of proper documentation. The early years were brutal. I remember sitting on the floor of our server room at 3 a.m., manually cross-referencing security clearances because we couldn't afford the automated systems. I built our first DD 254 submission by hand, taught myself the Joint Certification Program requirements, created audit trails that would satisfy the strictest federal inspector. When we got our first major contract, a $10 million communication system for Fort Meade, I was the one who caught the export control violation that would have killed us before we started. A single component, manufactured in Taiwan, that needed State Department approval. The engineers wanted to ignore it. Just a circuit board, they said. I spent 72 hours straight getting the proper licenses, knowing that one oversight could blacklist us forever. By year 3, I'd built something unprecedented, a compliance system so airtight that DCMA used us as a best practices example. Other contractors would call, offering me double, triple my salary to replicate it for them. I stayed. This was my system, my creation. Every form had my logic embedded in it. Every process bore my fingerprints. But the real masterpiece was the clearance structure. In the defense world, clearances aren't just background checks. They're the keys to the kingdom. I'd structured ours like a fail-safe system, with my name as the primary facility security officer on every major contract, not from ego, but from painful experience. I'd seen too many companies lose millions when their FSO quit, and no one could access classified programs for months. The younger employees never understood why I insisted on paper backups for critical documents, why I maintained personal relationships with every contracting officer, why I knew the direct numbers for DCMA compliance desk by heart. They grew up in the digital age, thought everything lived in the cloud, could be Googled, could be outsourced. Isla was the worst of them. She'd arrived 6 months ago with her strategic initiatives and synergy frameworks, looking at my department like it was a relic. Why do we need 12 people for compliance? She'd asked in her first all-hands. Amazon manages with 3. Amazon doesn't build classified defense systems. Amazon doesn't need facility clearances. Amazon doesn't have federal inspectors who can shut down production with a single failed audit. I tried to explain once, showing her the interconnected web of certifications, clearances, and contracts, how pulling one thread could unravel everything. She'd smiled that patronizing smile and said, "I'm sure we can streamline this." The irony was beautiful. Really. She'd been so focused on cutting costs that she never asked the crucial question, what happens when you fire the person whose name is on every federal authorization? In the defense contracting world, clearances aren't transferable like normal credentials. They're tied to individuals, verified through years of background checks, polygraphs, and continuous monitoring. When a cleared employee leaves, their access ends immediately, no grace period, no temporary transfer. The system treats it as a potential security breach. And Contract 918BX-17, that was our crown jewel, $108 million next-generation radar system for the Navy. I was the only one with the proper clearance level to access the technical specifications. The contract explicitly required the FSO to maintain continuous access. A single gap would trigger an automatic security review that could last months. As I drove home that Wednesday afternoon, I thought about warning them, maybe call Tom in contracts, hint about the clearance issue, but then I remembered Isla's dismissive wave, her certainty that Compliance Corps could handle everything. They'd figure it out soon enough. The federal system would teach them what I couldn't, that some knowledge can't be Googled, some relationships can't be templated, and some corners, when cut, cost more than you can imagine. I pulled into my driveway at 4:15 p.m., earlier than I'd been home in years. My neighbor waved from her garden. "Early day, Alex." "Something like that," I said, hefting my canvas bag. Inside it was 11 years of experience, relationships, and the technical knowledge that kept a $100 million contract alive. Savanta thought they'd freed themselves from unnecessary overhead. They had no idea they'd just started a 72-hour countdown to catastrophe. The first thing I did when I got home was make tea. Earl Grey, no sugar, in the chipped mug from my first DCMA conference. Then I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. 3 tasks, each one perfectly legal, each one devastating. First, the JPAS system, Joint Personnel Adjudication System, where all security clearances live. I logged in with my personal credentials they'd forgotten to revoke my home access. Probably didn't even know I had it. The screen filled with familiar fields, the same ones I'd navigated 1,000 times. I navigated to my profile and clicked Voluntary Surrender of Clearance. A warning popped up. This action cannot be reversed. Surrendering your clearance will immediately terminate all associated accesses and require full reinvestigation for reinstatement. Continue. Yes. The system processed for 30 seconds, then confirmed, clearance termination effective immediately. All associated facility accesses have been suspended pending designation of new FSO. Second task, backing up my files, not company secrets. I wasn't a thief, just the audit logs, email chains, and documentation that proved every decision I'd made over 11 years. The paper trail that showed how many times I'd warned about cost-cutting and compliance, how many near misses I'd prevented, how many federal violations I'd caught before they became disasters, my insurance policy, stored on an encrypted drive that would never see daylight unless someone tried to blame me for what was coming. The downloads took an hour. Chain of custody documents, audit trails, certification histories, every email where Isla had overruled my recommendations, every meeting where I'd been told compliance was overcautious, evidence of competence in an incompetent system. Third task, the Manila folder, Contract 918BX-17. People think classified contracts are locked in underground vaults, accessible only through retinal scanners and armed guards. The reality is more mundane and more fragile. The technical specifications, yes, those are classified. But the contract itself, the legal framework that allows the work to proceed, that lives in multiple places, and I had legitimate access to a paper copy as the designated FSO. I spread the pages across my table, 112 pages of dense legal text, security requirements, and delivery schedules. Page 47, Section J. Attachment 3. Security requirements and facility clearance maintenance. The beautiful, terrible truth, hidden in subsection 12.4.1. The contractor shall maintain continuous facility clearance at the secret level or higher. The designated Facility Security Officer, FSO, must maintain active clearance and be available for federal inspection within 24 hours' notice. Any lapse in FSO coverage exceeding 72 hours shall result in automatic suspension of work pending security review. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah in contracts. "Alex, what's this about you leaving? Who's taking over the JPAS admin?" I didn't reply. They'd figure it out. Another text, this one from Marcus the security guard. "Ms. Morgan, the visitor system is showing an error. Says FSO authorization expired." Then an email notification. Tom from contracts, marked urgent. "Alex, call me. The DCMA portal is showing our FSO as vacant, and I can't update the monthly compliance report." I turned off my phone. The beauty of federal compliance is its inflexibility. The system doesn't care about your reasons, your cost-cutting measures, or your strategic initiatives. It follows rules written in blood and billion-dollar failures. When I voluntarily surrendered my clearance, every system I was connected to JPAS, DCMA, The Navy's contractor portal immediately flagged Savanta as non-compliant. Somewhere in Savanta's gleaming headquarters, alerts were starting to pop up. Automated emails from systems that hadn't been checked in years because I'd always handled them. Phone calls from contracting officers wondering why their portal access showed pending security review. The first confused messages as people realized they couldn't access classified servers, couldn't process security badges, couldn't even log into the systems that verified their other clearances. I imagined Isla's face when someone finally explained what FSO meant, when she realized that Compliance Core, for all their templates and 40% cost savings, couldn't possibly have the clearances needed for classified contracts. The clearance process takes 18 months minimum. You can't fast-track trust. By 6 p.m., I'd organized everything. The backup drives went into my safe. The contract stayed on my table. I liked looking at it, this $100 million promise that was dissolving by the hour. I poured another cup of tea and sat by my window, watching the suburban evening unfold. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that a few miles away, an empire was beginning its 72-hour collapse. They'd call eventually, when the panic set deep enough, when they understood the magnitude of their mistake, but by then, the damage would be done. Federal contracts don't forgive, and security violations don't accept apologies. I'd given them 11 years to appreciate what I'd built. They'd had 6 months to understand what Isla was destroying. Now they had 72 hours to learn what surplus to requirements really cost. My kitchen clock ticked toward 7 p.m. Somewhere, the first dominoes were falling, and I sat in my quiet house, drinking tea from a chipped mug, holding the keys to a kingdom that no longer recognized my name. Thursday morning, 7:43 a.m. I was spreading cream cheese on a bagel when my landline rang. Nobody calls landlines anymore unless it's serious. Ms. Morgan. The voice was crisp, military. This is Special Agent David Hutchinson, Defense Criminal Investigative Service. I'm trying to reach the Facility Security Officer for Savanta Systems regarding an urgent compliance matter. I'm no longer employed by Savanta, I said, taking a bite of bagel. They terminated my position yesterday at 2 p.m. Silence. Then, you're listed as the FSO of record for multiple classified contracts. Who's your replacement? I wouldn't know. You'd have to ask Ms. Isla Redford, the Vice President of Operations. She handled my termination. I see. Papers shuffled. Ms. Morgan, are you aware that Savanta's facility clearance is showing as invalid as of yesterday afternoon? That would make sense, I said. When an FSO leaves, clearances need to be transferred. It's a standard security protocol. Yes, I'm aware of the protocol. His tone sharpened. I'm calling because we have 300 personnel scheduled to access the Melbourne facility this morning for Project Windcat, and their badges are showing as invalid. The entire facility is locked down. Melbourne, our Florida manufacturing plant, where the radar components for Contract 918BX-17 were assembled, 300 engineers and technicians, probably standing in the parking lot right now, wondering why their badges didn't work. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, but I'm no longer authorized to discuss Savanta operations. Ms. Morgan, I need to be very clear. We have a $100 million defense project that's effectively frozen. If this isn't resolved by close of business today, DCMA will initiate a full security review. I knew what that meant. 6 months minimum. Every contract suspended. Every clearance reinvestigated. Corporate death by paperwork. Agent Hutchinson, I'm sure Savanta's new compliance team will handle it. They've contracted with Compliance Core. Very efficient. I'm told. 40% cost savings. He actually laughed. Compliance Core. They're not cleared for anything above public trust. Who made that decision? Ms. Redford. I'm sure she had her reasons. Jesus Christ. Not very professional, but I understood his frustration. Ms. Morgan, off the record, how bad is this? I considered my words carefully. Agent Hutchinson, have you ever seen a building demolished? They don't tear it down brick by brick. They remove the foundation supports and let gravity do the work. And you were the foundation. I was the FSO for 11 contracts totaling over $400 million. Draw your own conclusions. After he hung up, I turned on my laptop and logged into LinkedIn. Not to job hunt. I wanted to watch. By 9 a.m., the posts started appearing. Savanta employees asking if anyone else was locked out of systems. Engineers wondering why the production floor was empty. IT staff discovering that classified servers were inaccessible. Then came the news alerts. Defense contractor Savanta Systems faces production halt. Security concerns freeze major Navy contract. Melbourne facility lockdown affects hundreds. My phone, the one I'd turned back on, exploded with calls. Unknown numbers I didn't answer. Former colleagues I let go to voicemail. At 11:20 a.m., a number I recognized, Douglas Redford, CEO. I let it ring. The voicemail was exactly what I expected. Alex, this is Douglas. There seems to be some confusion about the transition. Please call me immediately. We need to resolve this situation. Confusion, not an apology, not an admission of error. Confusion. By noon. Local news had picked up the story. A reporter standing outside the Melbourne facility, interviewing confused employees. We showed up for our shift and couldn't get in, one technician said. 11 years I've worked here, never seen anything like it. At 12:45 p.m., another call from DCMA. Different agent. Same message, fix this or face the consequences. I gave the same response, I don't work there anymore. But you could fix it, the agent pressed. If they brought you back, you could restore access. Theoretically, I said. If I still had clearance, but I voluntarily surrendered it yesterday, reinstatement takes 18 months minimum. I'm sure Ms. Redford knew that when she terminated me. The agent's curse was more creative than Hutchinson's. By 2 p.m., exactly 24 hours after my termination, Savanta had lost access to 3 facilities, the ability to work on any classified project, their standing with DCMA, approximately $12 million in daily revenue. The beautiful irony, every system that failed had my signature on its implementation. Every security measure that locked them out was one I'd designed to protect them. The fortress I'd built to keep threats out was now keeping them out instead. At 3:15 p.m., a FedEx truck pulled up. Overnight delivery. Signature required. Inside, a single sheet of Savanta letterhead. Ms. Morgan, we are prepared to discuss your immediate reinstatement with full benefits and a senior consultant position. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Douglas Redford. I filed it in my folder with Contract 918BX17. Evidence for later, when they'd try to claim I'd abandoned my duties or sabotaged their systems. Paper trails work both ways. The 72-hour clock was ticking. By close of business tomorrow, DCMA would initiate a formal review that couldn't be stopped. Every hour that passed made recovery harder, more expensive, less likely. I made another cup of tea and settled in to watch the news. They were calling it a security crisis now. Tomorrow, they'd call it something worse. Friday morning brought chaos wrapped in desperation. My phone started ringing at 6:12 a.m. This time, I recognized the number Sarah from contracts, probably calling from her personal cell. Alex, please, I know you're not obligated to help, but Tom's having a panic attack. Literally. They took him to the hospital last night. The entire contracts department is paralyzed. I felt a twinge of sympathy for Tom. Good man. Worked hard. Understood the value of compliance. Not his fault leadership was blind. I'm sorry about Tom, I said, but there's nothing I can do. Isla's locked in conference room C with 2 federal agents. They've been there since yesterday afternoon. Nobody's allowed near that wing of the building. So the interviews had started. Standard procedure when a cleared facility has a major security breach. Every decision, every email, every signature would be scrutinized. Isla was about to learn what real accountability looked like. By 8 a.m., the story had gone national. Major defense contractor faces federal investigation. The stock market opened with Savanta down 12%, then 15%, then trading was halted altogether. I was reviewing my garden plans. Maybe I'd finally plant those roses when an unexpected email arrived. Not from Savanta, but from Janice Kumar at Northridge Defense. Alex, heard about the situation at Savanta. We've been looking for a senior compliance director, interested in a conversation. Then another from Systech Corporation, then Maverick Defense Solutions. Word travels fast in the cleared contractor community. By noon, I had 7 serious inquiries. But the real entertainment came at 1:30 p.m., when someone leaked an internal Savanta email to Defense Daily News. Isla's message to all staff, sent Thursday evening. Team, we are experiencing temporary technical difficulties with some access systems. Compliance Corps is working diligently to resolve these minor issues. There is no cause for concern. Please continue your regular duties. Minor issues. 3 facilities locked down. Federal investigations launched. Production halted on critical defense projects. Minor issues. The comments section was brutal. Industry veterans who'd kept quiet about Savanta's corner cutting for years suddenly found their voices. Saw this coming when they started treating compliance like overhead. You can't template your way through federal requirements. Bet they wish that 40% savings looked less attractive now. At 3 p.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in an expensive suit, flanked by 2 men who screamed corporate lawyer. Ms. Morgan. I'm Linda Castellano from Brennan. Hart and Associates. We represent Savanta Systems. May we speak with you? I opened the door but didn't invite them in. If this is about employment matters, you should know I'm represented by counsel. I wasn't, but they didn't need to know that. Ms. Morgan, we're here to discuss an urgent matter of national security. Savanta is prepared to offer you an executive position, retroactive compensation, and full benefits if you'll help resolve the current situation. I voluntarily surrendered my clearance, I said. Reinstatement takes 18 months, yes, but there are emergency provisions. If you agree to return immediately, we can file for expedited reinstatement based on critical infrastructure needs. I knew about emergency provisions. I also knew they required admitting gross negligence and letting cleared personnel go. The paperwork alone would be devastating in court. What position, I asked. Senior Vice President of Compliance and Risk Management, reporting directly to the CEO. And Isla Redford. Castellano's poker face slipped. Ms. Redford's role is under review. I see, I pretended to consider. And the compensation? 300,000 base, plus bonuses, full relocation package if needed, signing bonus of 100,000. More than triple my old salary. They were hemorrhaging money so fast that 300,000 probably seemed like pocket change. I'll need that in writing, I said, and I'll need to see the full termination report on Isla Redford, the contract with Compliance Corps, and all communication regarding my position elimination. Ms. Morgan, time is of the essence. Yes, it is. You have about 18 hours before DCMA makes this permanent. I suggest you move quickly. After they left, I checked the news again. The Melbourne facility was still locked. Employees were gathering in the parking lot, some with handmade signs. 11 years of service, locked out in one day. Local politicians were starting to make statements about job security and corporate responsibility. But the real bombshell came at 5:45 p.m., buried in a Defense Department procurement notice. Contract 918BX-17. Notice of potential termination for default. Contractor has failed to maintain required security clearances and facility access. Show cause response required within 30 days. $108 million, evaporating like morning mist, all because someone thought compliance was too expensive. My phone rang again. Douglas Redford himself. 3rd attempt of the day. This time, I answered. Hello, Douglas. Alex. His voice sounded aged, exhausted. I suspect you know why I'm calling. I have some idea. I've just come from an emergency board meeting. Isla Redford has been relieved of all duties, effective immediately. The board has authorized me to offer you whatever it takes to come back. It's not about money, Douglas. Then what? Name it. Executive Parking Corner Office Direct Report to the Board. He still didn't understand. After all this, he thought it was about perks and status. Douglas, I spent 11 years building something irreplaceable. You let your niece destroy it in 6 months because she promised to save you money. Now you want me to fix it. Even if I could, and that's a big if, why would I? Silence. Then, because you care about the people, the 300 workers locked out in Melbourne, the engineers who can't access their projects, the contracts team having breakdowns. I know you, Alex, you won't let them suffer for our mistakes. He was right, and wrong. I did care about the people, which is exactly why I'd let Savanta learn this lesson fully, completely, catastrophically, so it would never happen again. Douglas, check your email. Your lawyer sent an offer. I'll review it over the weekend. If I decide to help, it won't be as an employee. It'll be as an independent consultant, with full autonomy and a very specific contract. Anything, just please. I'll be in touch Monday morning. Try not to lose any more facilities over the weekend. I hung up and went back to my garden plans. The roses would look nice by the front window, maybe some lavender along the walkway. Somewhere across town, an empire built on classified contracts and federal trust was crumbling, all because someone thought the foundation was surplus to requirements. The weekend was a masterclass in corporate destruction. I watched from my living room as Savanta systems disintegrated in real time, each news update adding another layer to the catastrophe. Saturday morning, the Washington Post ran a feature, "The Compliance Officer Who Held the Keys Inside Savanta's Security Meltdown." Someone had leaked my entire employment history, including commendations from DCMA, industry awards, and the email chains where I'd warned about compliance risks. The contrast with Isla's LinkedIn profile full of buzzwords but empty of substance was devastating. By Saturday afternoon, the Melbourne facility made national news again. Workers had organized a protest, demanding answers. The visual was powerful: hundreds of cleared defense workers locked out of their own workplace, holding signs that read, 11 years of service, 72 hours to destruction. The internal collapse accelerated. My former colleague Jim from IT called, his voice shaking. "Alex, it's worse than you know. When the classified systems locked us out, we discovered Isla had been storing sensitive documents on Compliance Corps' cloud servers, unencrypted. It's a massive security breach." I felt my blood chill. How massive? Technical specifications, employee clearance data, project timelines. DCIS is treating it as a potential espionage case. Espionage. That changed everything. A compliance failure was fixable with time and money. Espionage investigations could last years. Freeze all contracts. Trigger congressional hearings. Savanta wasn't just dying, it was being autopsied while still breathing. Sunday brought more revelations. The audit team, trying to document the damage, discovered that Isla had been systematically overriding compliance protocols for months. Streamlining, she'd called it. In reality, she'd been dismantling every safeguard I'd built, creating vulnerabilities that would take years to fully understand. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Recruiters, reporters, former colleagues, everyone wanted to talk to the woman who'd brought down a defense contractor by simply walking away. I ignored them all, focusing instead on a different set of emails. Nexava Defense Group, a newer company, lean but ambitious, with leadership that understood the value of infrastructure. They'd been courting me for 2 years, always respectfully, always acknowledging what I'd built at Savanta. Now they were offering not just a position, but a partnership senior vice president of federal risk management, equity stake, complete autonomy to build their compliance division from scratch. "We've watched what you created at Savanta," their CEO, Marcus Webb, had written. "We've also watched what happened when they didn't value it. We won't make that mistake." But the most interesting development came Sunday evening, a secure message through a DCMA back channel I hadn't used in years, from Colonel Patricia Hayes, the senior contracting officer who'd overseen Savanta's largest projects. "Alex, we need to talk, off the record. The damage to multiple critical defense programs is severe. We're considering debarment proceedings against Savanta, permanent exclusion from federal contracting. Your name keeps coming up as the only person who truly understood their compliance infrastructure. Some very senior people are asking if you'd consider a federal position. Clean up this mess from our side. Help us prevent it from happening again. Interested." A federal position, probably GS-15, maybe senior executive service. The chance to write the regulations that would prevent other companies from making Savanta's mistakes. It was tempting. At 9 p.m. Sunday, Savanta's board announced an emergency trading halt for Monday, pending resolution of federal compliance matters. Translation: the company was in freefall, and they were desperately trying to deploy a parachute that I'd packed and they'd thrown away. My laptop chimed with another email. Linda Castellano, the lawyer, with a revised offer. The number had jumped to $500,000 base salary, 200,000 signing bonus, and a list of perks that read like a CEO package. At the bottom, a handwritten note scanned in Ms. Morgan, please, people's livelihoods depend on this, Douglas Redford. I printed it out and added it to my folder. Evidence of desperation. Evidence of the price of short-sighted decisions. The irony was exquisite. They'd fired me to save maybe $200,000 a year. The Melbourne facility alone was losing $12 million per day. Contract 918BX. 17 was gone $108 million void. Stock value had cratered by 40%, wiping out nearly $1 billion in market cap. The security breach investigation would cost millions more, not counting potential fines and lawsuits, all to save 40% on compliance costs. Monday morning would bring the moment of truth. DCMA's 72-hour deadline would expire. Without an authorized FSO, without valid clearances, without access to classified systems, Savanta would officially enter corporate purgatory alive, but unable to function in the cleared space that generated 90% of their revenue. I opened my laptop and began drafting 3 emails. To Douglas Redford, my terms for consulting, non-negotiable, including full autonomy, a forensic audit of all ILA's decisions, and public acknowledgement of the systematic dismantling of compliance infrastructure. To Marcus Webb at Nexava, my acceptance of his offer, contingent on certain conditions about building a compliance culture that couldn't be destroyed by the next MBA with a cost-cutting mandate. To Colonel Hayes, my interest in discussing the federal position, but only after Savanta's situation was resolved. Someone had to document this disaster properly, create the case study that would haunt business schools and boardrooms for decades. As I finished typing, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking DoD suspends all Savanta contracts pending security review. The accompanying photo showed the empty Melbourne facility, its parking lot full of confused workers, its assembly lines silent. Somewhere in her involuntary isolation, Isla Redford was learning that some corners, when cut, create wounds that never heal, that some knowledge can't be Googled, some systems can't be templated, and some people can't be replaced. The 72 hours were almost up. The empire had fallen, and I sat in my quiet kitchen, holding the keys to its resurrection or its funeral, deciding which they deserved. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. At exactly 8 a.m., my phone rang. Marcus Webb from Nexava Defense Group. Alex, I hope you've had time to consider our offer. Given the current situation in the defense contracting space, we believe your expertise is more valuable than ever. His tone was careful, professional. He knew I was being courted by everyone, including Savanta. What he didn't know was that I'd already made my decision. Marcus, I'm interested, but I need specifics about autonomy and structure. I won't build another system that can be dismantled by the next executive with a spreadsheet. Understood completely. Can you come in this afternoon? I'd like you to meet our board. They've been following the Savanta situation closely. It's become required reading for what not to do. We scheduled for 2 p.m. As I hung up, another call came through. Douglas Redford. Alex, did you receive our revised offer? I did. And, Douglas, let me ask you something. When Isla proposed cutting compliance, did anyone on your board ask about the risks? Did anyone wonder why a department that had 0 violations in 11 years needed streamlining? Silence. Then, the board was focused on quarterly projections. Isla's PowerPoint was very compelling. PowerPoints don't maintain clearances. Spreadsheets don't prevent federal investigations. I know that now. Alex, please. We're hemorrhaging talent. 3 senior engineers resigned this morning. Our prime contractors are threatening to pull out. Lockheed is already transitioning our subcontracts to other suppliers. Lockheed. Once they started pulling contracts, the death spiral accelerated. No major prime would risk their own clearances by working with a compromised subcontractor. I'll consult, I said finally, but not as an employee. My terms are non-negotiable complete autonomy, direct report to the board, not management. Isla's entire leadership team removed from any compliance-adjacent roles, and a public statement acknowledging that gutting compliance infrastructure caused this crisis. The board will never agree to public admission of fault. The liability. The liability already exists. Douglas, every employee locked out, every contract lost, every security breach, they're all documented. You can admit the mistake and show you're fixing it, or wait for the lawsuits to tell the story for you. He sighed, defeated. I'll take it to the board. When can you start? After I review the full damage assessment, send me every decision Isla made, every system she touched, every protocol she streamlined. I need to know how deep the rot goes. That could take days to compile. Then you'd better start now. The longer Savanta stays dark, the harder resurrection becomes. After hanging up, I drove to Nexava's headquarters. Unlike Savanta's glass and steel monument to ego, Nexava operated from a converted warehouse, practical and secure. Marcus Webb met me at security. Their badges worked, I noticed. Before we go in, he said, I want you to know something. Half our board are former military, people who understand that compliance isn't overhead, it's operations. The other half are engineers who've been burned by compliance failures. Nobody here thinks you can download expertise. The boardroom was simple functional furniture, walls lined with whiteboards covered in technical diagrams. 7 people around a table, no theatrical lighting or executive theater. Ms. Morgan, the board chair, a former admiral named Patricia Chen, stood to shake my hand. We've been hoping to meet you for some time. Recent events have only confirmed what we suspected. You're the best compliance architect in the industry. We talked for 2 hours, not about salary or benefits, but about philosophy, about building systems that endured, creating cultures that valued infrastructure, protecting the unglamorous foundations that kept everything running. We're offering you partnership, not just employment, Marcus explained. 2% equity, vesting over 4 years, your division, your rules, your hires. The only metric we care about is this: keep us cleared and compliant. What's your current compliance structure? I asked. Basic. We've been limping along with consultants, waiting for the right person to build it properly. We've turned down 3 major contracts because we didn't have the infrastructure to support them safely. Turned down contracts.